What do you do when your spouse keeps hurting you and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight? And that's what we're talking about today on Marriage Unmasked. And that's something that we have walked through in our marriage. If you're in this situation, you're probably exhausted by this dynamic. You have hoped for change over and over again. You've been promised change over and over again, and yet that change isn't happening. This cycle of hope and then disappointment, hope and then disappointment. And that can be really hard and really difficult to walk through. So either way, whether you're the spouse that keeps on hoping for change, keeps on saying, hey, this is hurting me, and then nothing changes, or maybe you're the spouse who keeps on saying, well, I didn't mean to hurt them, and yet I did it again. And it's so easy to go to shame and to feel pain there as well, because you keep promising change and then it doesn't actually happen. You don't actually follow through. That can also be very difficult. And so either way, this episode is for you today.
Yeah, and repeatedly getting hurt in marriage, it doesn't just create pain in that moment. It actually creates disconnection in the relationship, and then fear can come in and resentment, and then eventually feeling numb. And I was actually just coaching a wife from my restored community today. She's been going through all those different stages, and she was sharing them with me because she has been repeatedly hurt for 20 plus years in her marriage, and she finds herself numb now. There's a difference though between pain, getting hurt once or twice irregularly, right? And chronic pain. So I've shared before, I get chronic migraines and I've had them for over 10 years. And that's very different to struggle with that kind of pain versus just getting a headache here and there. I actually feel like I have trauma from the chronic pain, and it has affected me spiritually. It's affected me emotionally, physically, obviously, mentally, all the things. It has really had a bigger impact than I ever imagined that it would. And so that's the same kind of thing here, right? A single hurt that can be worked through, but that repeated hurt, it leads to stories and deep beliefs like I'm not safe, right? It's maybe not even something that you're thinking, but it's subconscious. It's deep in your body. Maybe another one is like, I can't relax, or I have to protect myself. These stories, again, can create that disconnection and that deep pain, the resentment, and the numbness. So repeatedly lying, repeatedly physically harming someone, or exploding, criticizing, dismissing even. When you experience those behaviors from your spouse over and over again, you put a wall up around your heart, right? Because you're trying to protect yourself from more pain. And that makes sense. And that might look like withdrawing, criticizing them back. Sometimes it looks like trying to control things. Again, it's because you're trying to feel safe. You're trying to protect yourself from more of that pain. And sometimes it ends up, with you kind of being numb to it all and just checking out because it feels like you can't show up anymore and have that safety. Sometimes you just want to give up. Just this deep, deep feeling of hopelessness and the resentments underneath, all kinds of things, right? It is a lot to wade through. And many couples, they don't realize that they're fighting about the accumulated pain over time. That's what's actually at the root of the disconnection they're feeling. They think that it's just about something that happened in the moment, but it's really that accumulated pain that was never repaired.
So the Bible has a lot to say about this as well, and enduring this kind of repeated hurt and harm. Yes, it says stuff like turn the other cheek, but that doesn't mean that you put yourself in harm's way over and over again. It doesn't mean that you just accept emotional or physical abuse again and again. There is something to really protecting yourself. And Jesus also addresses this when he talks in Matthew 18 about when someone sins against you, you go to them and you have a direct confrontation about it. You actually put it all out on the table and you get it dealt with. After there's a confrontation like that, there needs to be repentance, and then there needs to be repair. And repentance doesn't mean that that is going to continue to happen, that the person is going to continue to choose those same actions over and over again. It's not to say that sometimes these things can't happen again, but when there's a pattern like this, it's showing that there's something going on in their heart. They haven't actually dealt with the reason why they're showing up that way. It is not okay for them to continue to behave in a way that's going to damage and hurt the relationship. True heart repentance is not just saying you're sorry so that you can go ahead and do it again next time. There actually needs to be some change in behavior. The word repentance means like a complete turnaround. It's a change of mind. It's a change of the way that you're acting as well. And you can't just continue to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what the person who is getting hurt repeatedly, that's what they're feeling. It's like they just keep saying sorry and yet nothing changes. And that is a really painful thing to experience. So for the person who is repeatedly getting hurt, which I just want to say, this isn't just always the woman. In our relationship, it maybe seemed that way, that Adam was the one repeatedly hurting me because he was saying sorry, and then he would do that same behavior again, over and over. And this just kept happening and happening. So yes, that did lead to a lot of hurt for me. But on the other hand, there was also repeated hurt towards Adam from me. I was criticizing Adam. I was really not speaking life over him. I was speaking out of my frustration and my pain. And a lot of times what happened was he never called me out on that, probably because he was in so much shame.
Shame is at the root of all
Right.
that. Yeah.
So he's feeling shame. And so he's not calling me out on some of the ways that I'm actually hurting him.
That's true.
So this can be the case for either spouse where you feel like you're repeatedly getting hurt. And for Adam, he just wasn't voicing that hurt necessarily. I'm trying to think if you did ever voice it.
I would voice it, but I wouldn't do it in very healthy ways. Some of my repeated action of hurting was born out of some resentment and born out of feeling hurt myself. It was a vicious cycle because I was in this shame spiral. And so then I would often try to change, and then I would throw up my hands and give up changing because I was feeling hurt myself. And that was obviously not healthy.
So if you are the one who is getting hurt repeatedly, I know a lot of times you're tempted to kind of try harder to explain. And I felt like I bent over backwards trying to have conversation after conversation and maybe like, okay, let me change it up. Let me try saying it this way. Maybe he doesn't really understand how much this hurts me. It gets to be exhausting when you just keep trying to make them understand. Or sometimes you're tempted to shut down. And I did that plenty of times too, where it was just like, okay, I don't even think I can have a relationship with him right now. Like, this feels so discouraging and hopeless that I'm just gonna shut down to it all. Or maybe you are tempted to become controlling to stop the pain. And like I said, that was definitely me too, where it was like, I will try to make him be a certain way. I will try to, lay it all out for him. Do this, do that, do this. Or I was trying to stop the pain in any way that I could possibly think of. And they weren't always healthy ways. And none of that stuff really helps. So what you want to do is you want to get really clear on what is actually hurting you. So for me, it was letting him know that was really painful for me, that he was breaking trust. So getting really clear on that. Then the second thing that I would recommend is to stop begging for understanding. Let the pressure off. So what I was trying to do with him was I was trying to motivate him to change, because it was like, he clearly isn't motivated to change himself. So I was trying to motivate him to change. I was trying to make him behave in a way that would feel safe to me. And so there was a lot of pressure that I was applying that I didn't realize I was applying. But it's damaging. That pressure is like, who can handle that kind of pressure, right? That's really heavy to put on somebody, especially when they're already probably dealing with shame and other things. He's struggling clearly to keep his word, and then the shame, and then there's this pressure from me. And so I imagine that it was just really exhausting, and he's also losing some of what he's needing, which is admiration and respect and some of those things from me as well, right? So I needed to really take the pressure off and come to peace with, okay, if this is how he's choosing to behave, I'm going to let him choose that. Now, we're not talking about physical abuse here or, emotional abuse, anything like sexual abuse. So that is a different story. I'm not saying let them keep abusing you. This was different. It's still very painful. Some of these other things we're talking about besides abuse, those things are still very painful and they need to be addressed. But abuse, that there needs to absolutely be a boundary there. But for me, I decided to kind of let him, like, okay, if this is what he's going to do, I'm going to let him choose that behavior. I need to focus on, which is the next thing I would recommend, is to choose healing. I needed to choose to heal my heart from all these years of hurt, all these years of trust being broken and unsafety in our marriage. I needed to heal that with God. And I needed to create that safety for myself with God, no matter if Adam was creating unsafety in our relationship. And so that was really, really key for me. And then the last thing I'd recommend is to set clear boundaries to protect the connection. So if I just keep, okay, well, I'm just going to let him keep breaking trust, right? That's not necessarily going to help us to be connected again. So I'm going to let him know if this happens, this is how I'm going to respond. So, for example, Adam might say, I'm going to handle this thing with the kids. I'm going to take care of this, right? There's a big issue with one of our kids, and Adam says, I'm going to take care of that, but then he doesn't. Then I'm going to let him know, right? If you choose to not keep your word, choose to not handle what you said you're going to handle, then I'm going to choose to step in and handle that because it needs to be addressed. Right. So you can create boundaries like that, whether it's, maybe they are criticizing and they are constantly criticizing you and it's really painful. You can set a boundary when you talk to me that way, when you call me names, when you say things like that to protect our connection. I'm going to walk away and take a 5-minute break to let us get grounded again, process our emotions, and then come back for a healthy conversation because I really don't want either one of us to feel more hurt. Expressing that boundary to protect the connection. Not setting a boundary to separate, but it's to prevent any more pain and protect that very special connection that you have.
Yeah. And for the spouse who is causing the hurt, there's some key things that you really need as well. One of the big ones that I needed for many years was I needed to actually heal what was going on inside. I needed to actually work on the shame that was keeping me stuck and honestly, a lot of times the victim mindset that was keeping me stuck in that place because the way I was looking at myself was often victim of circumstances and I was blaming other things rather than taking ownership in actually doing something differently. And I was blaming Kara too. I was blaming her. I was twisting things around in my mind to justify what I was doing or not doing. Mm-hmm. And so I had these excuses in my mind, and those excuses actually kept me stuck doing the same thing. Rather than actually understanding that those were excuses, they weren't helping me, they weren't serving me, they weren't serving the relationship at all. They were keeping me stuck. And then there was this despair. There was this shame that I was dealing with, thinking that I can't change. I'm never good enough. And a lot of men struggle with that in their marriage. I've struggled mightily with that. If you don't actually believe that you're worth something, then shame will affect the way that you show up. You stop to follow through on the things that you say you're going to do because you have this sense of worthlessness about yourself. You're not dialed into your purpose as a man. You're not dialed into really who you are and how you really truly want to show up in situations. You start to become, like I said, the victim of circumstances instead of choosing your response, choosing to keep your word, choosing to make the changes that you need to make in order to show up the way you've promised that you were going to show up. So if you're the one who's saying, I didn't mean to, I'm trying to change, why can't she just forgive me and move on? And that was me a lot of times. I was often like, okay, well, I screwed up again. That was a mistake. Why can't she just move on from that mistake? Why can't she just forgive me? I'll do better next time because I had intentions of changing. I had intentions of doing things right or doing things differently next time. But I failed at those intentions over and over again because of some of these unhealed things, because of this unhelpful view of myself, and because of these victim stories that I was speaking over myself. So if you are the one who's saying, I didn't mean to, I'm trying here, can you please forgive me? You have to drill down on this truth that action is so much more powerful than intention. Action is important. Having the intention to do something, it may make you feel good, but it is not action. It's not actually doing something different. And true repair requires full ownership. And that is something that I did not do. I was not taking full ownership. I was blaming her. I was blaming circumstances. I was blaming anybody and everybody else to try to feel better about my own behavior instead of owning it. And that is really a masculine thing to do, is to own your responsibility fully for whatever you're contributing to the dynamic. And so that is the first step. You really have to have full ownership. And then you want to go for curiosity and care for what she's experiencing, what she's going through, instead of being defensive, instead of protecting yourself. Because when you are in self-protection, you're going to ruin the connection and you're going to cause more distrust to happen, because that defensiveness is like a wall. It does not allow a connection to happen. And then you have to have consistent change. So you got to heal the things you got to heal, understand why you're showing up this way, and then follow through and do the consistent change. It's vitally important, because consistency over time is what's going to rebuild and start to repair some of the hurt that's happened. Is then she can start to relax. Then she can start to lean back into you when you are consistently doing what you say you're going to do, and you're not hurting her in that same way anymore. Because if it's all promises without any actual follow through, all that is going to do is continue to hit her in that same wound. It's going to continue to erode the trust. It's going to continue to break the relationship and cause more and more pain in that exact same area. You have to have a willingness to grow and intentionally go after that growth. Go after healing those wounds, open them up for God and for yourself to really understand them and start to heal these things. Regulate yourself in the moment. Calm your nervous system down so that you can respond instead of reacting in an unhealthy pattern that you're stuck in, and be really vulnerable. You can't hide things and be closed off to your wife. It takes bravery to be open and to start to peel back some of these layers that have kept you stuck. And you start to break those patterns by doing all of these things, so that that hurt doesn't continue in the relationship.
Yeah, and I know Adam was kind of speaking to the men, but this is also for women, because like I said before, it's not just men who keep hurting their wives. Women also, a lot of times unintentionally, they are hurting their husbands as well, and we don't even understand, because we don't. And maybe this is true for men too, but I know as women, we don't understand what makes men feel alive, what makes them really step up and be the strong men that God made them to be. And so we unintentionally really do hurt them in ways that we think might actually be helping them.
And that is true. I mean, like, men also, like, what women need is often safety. And what we often think we need to do is explain ourselves, or we need to, like, give off reasons. And because if we're talking to other men, that is a way to repair the relationship, because now we understand each other. Now we're on the same page. We get it. And okay, now we can move on. And we try to treat our wives often the same way and think that we can just give a bunch of reasons and explanations and then we can just move on. That is not how it works, because that doesn't provide emotional safety for her to really understand and to really feel connected with you again as a man.
So as women, we too need to take ownership for where we have been hurting our husband. Whether we intended to or not, it happened. And we do need to take ownership for that, and then bring in that curiosity again. I remember apologizing to Adam, really feeling the weight of what I had done and how I had shown up, not in a shaming myself way, but just in okay, I realized that I really did play a big part here in hurting you and in the disconnection in our marriage. And so I just remember apologizing to him for so many things, for so many times, the pressure that I applied, or the way I treated him as maybe less than, because he wasn't showing up fully as a trustworthy man. And so I really had a posture of like condescension, I think. Is that how it felt to you?
Yeah, it did.
Because he's appearing to be the one who just keeps hurting me, but really I'm also hurting him through my hurt, right? There's that saying, hurt people. And I think that that's so, so true, which is why we both need to take ownership for healing our hurts. But anyway, I just think that needs to be said too, because it's not just men that hurt women. So I want to talk about, though, like the shame. We're not trying to bring shame to anybody ever, but I want to talk about Peter and how Jesus and Peter showed a really beautiful example of this. Peter, he loves Jesus so much, but he hurt him deeply. He denied knowing Jesus 3 times. Can you imagine if your spouse like denied even knowing you? Yeah. And then they did it over and over and over again. And Jesus didn't shame Peter, right? He didn't shame Peter, but he also didn't pretend that it didn't happen either. The next time that we see Jesus and Peter together, Peter's on a boat and Jesus is on the shore and Peter's fishing. Peter, when he realizes it's Jesus, he actually jumps off the boat. He was so excited to go see Jesus. So clearly he felt Jesus's love again. He felt welcomed. He felt accepted. He didn't feel shamed or judged or punished by Jesus. He wanted to come closer to Jesus. I think that says a lot. I think that's really important to remember when we're talking about hurting each other over and over again, because it can be very easy to shame them, to judge them. And that's where that kind of condescension can come in, like I was giving Adam. And so then Jesus says to him, he asks him 3 times, and this is actually after Jesus provided, right? Jesus provided food for him. Like he's taking care of Peter. He's loving him. He's showing up. He's being present. All those things matter. And then asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? I think that's so significant, right? The 3 times he denied and the 3 times he asks him, do you love me? And he invites Peter then into responsibility. He's like, feed my sheep, into purpose. He's not saying, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, Peter. You had your chance. You're done. I'm writing you off. Like, I'm moving on, right? No, he actually invites him back into responsibility and purpose. And I think that's really important for our marriage dynamic as well, when we're in pain and we're being hurt over and over, that we can walk through that forgiveness. And when we are working on healing our hearts with God, we're able to naturally want to extend that compassion and that love and forgiveness to our spouse. It's when we kind of get stuck, right? And it's easy to get there. It's easy to get stuck in the pain. But I encourage you, if you're there, if you're stuck, to start that healing again, to start that forgiveness. And this is what I work with so much in the Wise and Restored. I mean, we have weekly coaching. So every week they get to bring what they're going through and what they maybe are feeling stuck in. And we talk about this. In fact, just this last week, we were talking about forgiveness again and how it's can be so hard, especially when there might be an impact, right? This affects the marriage for years and years. And that happened for us too. Like he broke trust over and over, and that impacted our marriage for many, many, many years. And so we walk through that all together. You don't have to figure it out all alone, because what happens a lot of times when you're trying to do this alone is you do get stuck. You don't have anybody calling you up. You don't have anybody helping you reflect. You don't have anybody from the outside who can bring some truth in and bring some compassion and love to you too. And that's really an important thing that we do inside Restored. So anyway, that I think is a big part of this as well.
Yeah. And there's really, I would say, 4 steps to repairing this dynamic on the part of the person who is breaking trust or repeatedly hurting their spouse. And they're all important and they all have to happen. And the first one is that hurt has to be acknowledged. You have to acknowledge the hurt that you've caused. Mm-hmm. You have to get that out into the open and be real about it, because otherwise they don't feel seen or heard in that hurt. And that is necessary for repair to take place. And then you have to, as we talked about before, you have to take full responsibility. You own your part in this. You own what you've done. You own the situation fully without making excuses or getting defensive. And then you have to pursue healing. You have to pursue healing for yourself, like I mentioned too, but you also pursue healing the relationship. You pursue actually getting reconnected again, repairing what needs to be repaired, and dealing with the consequences of the fallout of what's happened. That's a process, and that takes time, but you have to pursue that connection again and repair that. Then prove the change through action. That is the key last step. You really need to show up consistently and stop doing the behaviors that are hurting your spouse over and over again in this area, and be a man or woman of your word and actually live the way that you're promising that you're going to live. So what about if that change is unclear or it seems awfully slow? There does have to be some discernment here. You have to ask some questions and really understand what's going on. Some good questions to ask is there some true humility happening? Like you can see that they are humble and they're willing and they're open to doing this work and changing. Is there effort that you can actually see? You can see effort being made. Is there some movement forward? even if it's not perfect, you can see something is changing. They're showing up differently in the relationship again.
Yeah, there's that passage in Galatians 6:9 that says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." And that passage has run through my head so many times through the years of our marriage. Because I have wanted to give up because it's been so painful and it seemed so discouraging. But I think that's where this discernment is helpful. And it's really important to be in charge of your own brain. You might have beliefs about him. For my brain, it was, he isn't trustworthy. He's not going to do what he says he's going to do. I can't believe him when he says something. His "I'm sorry's" mean nothing. And so I had to choose to look for where there might be effort put in, where there was movement, even if it was imperfect. I had to look for that. Otherwise, my brain was just going to keep looking for how he wasn't changing, how his "I'm sorry's" mean nothing, right? How he was untrustworthy. And I did that plenty, but I really had to take captive my own thoughts. Again, this is why it is so important to get support, because you can grow weary. I absolutely understand that. We both understand that. It's hard. This is not an easy thing to do. And I also want you to know that staying the course doesn't mean that you are abandoning yourself. You're not doing good by silently suffering. That's not what that passage means. It doesn't mean just put up with whatever and just be quiet. No, that doesn't somehow make you a better Christian. I don't even think there is such a thing, right? In my opinion. But that's not the goal. Your pain matters, your heart matters, right? God is walking with you through every single moment, and I encourage you to invite him into this. This is what makes it doable. This is what brings beauty into this can be very painful journey. It's God's love. It's his compassion that helps you to be full, live from a full place, even if your spouse is hurting you.
Yeah, there really is no need for shame. Shame will just keep you stuck in that same place. It'll keep you stuck in that same energy like it did me for many, many years. This is really an invitation into deeper love from God, understanding his love more and more. Because as we understand his love and how it is ours, and how we are forgiven, how he sees us as his children, then that healing starts to really take root in our hearts, and we can start to show up differently. And we can change some of these patterns and some of these behaviors out of a place of being loved and full and whole again. If this podcast has been helpful for you today, if you had some good takeaways, if it gave you some insight into this situation and gave you some hope for some healing and some change, then we'd really appreciate it if you'd share the podcast, that you would like it and comment and give us some feedback. And we'll see you next week.